not just sitting at each other in silence. Hello, everybody coming in. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. We're just letting everyone come in. We want to hear where everyone is coming from. So let us know in the chat, please. And happy International Women's Day. That should have been the first thing I said. Hello. Let us know where you're coming from. Virginia. So am I. Hello. Happy Women's Day, everybody. Going to give it a minute or so. I think 1:05 is a great time to, hello, Belinda from Paris. Hello, someone joining from West Virginia. Hello, hello, welcome. Happy Women's Day. Though I think all of us here celebrate it every day. But we're happy to have this excuse to do this program. Hi, everybody. We love seeing where everyone's from. Happy you are here. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started if our crew here is ready to roll. I'm Carolyn. I'm just hopping in real quick. I know you all have seen a lot of me already today, and you'll keep seeing me later. But I just want to thank everyone coming in who is celebrating International Women's Day with the National Museum of the Arts. This is a very exciting conversation and program we're about to have. We were just talking before we went live that the pandemic has been challenging, but the fact that we can have this program is a silver lining. The fact that we are spanning so many time zones right now to have this conversation and bringing you two artists it would take a lot to bring them together because they live on opposite sides of the world. So we are happy to have you here. I want to say thank you so much to our program sponsor for the day, J. Crew, who have kindly sponsored our whole International Women's Day and focusing on a lot of empowering women this year. So we thank J. Crew. Now I'm going to disappear. I will be in the chat linking things, but I'm going to pass it to our assistant curator at the museum, Orin Zahra. Hi, Orin. Happy Women's Day to you.
Happy Women's Day to you, Carolyn, and to everyone tuning in. Again, my name is Orin Zahra. I'm the assistant curator at the National Museum of Women in the Arts. And thank you to everyone for joining NMWA's International Women's Day virtual festival. I hope you've had a chance to tune in and enjoy some of the other wonderful programming that we have already had today, but we also have planned for later on today. In this hour, we will be in conversation with two powerhouse artists, Tabitha Soren and Rehab Eldalil, and we're going to hear from each of them for about 10 to 15 minutes as a way to introduce us all to their individual practices. And then we'll have a little chat. We'll also take some of your questions along the way. So Carolyn and I will keep track of the questions you ask. So please make sure to drop those into the chat box or the Q&A box below. So with that, let me introduce our first artist, Rehab Eldalil. Rehab is a documentary photographer and visual storyteller based in Cairo, Egypt. Her work focuses on the broad theme of identity explored through participatory creative practices. Rehab holds a BA in photography from Helwan University in Cairo that she received in 2011 and a photography MA from Falmouth University in the UK in 2020, and also a one-year certificate from the International Center of Photography from in 2021 from New York. She has so many accolades to her name, so I'm only going to say a few of them. Her work was shortlisted for the PH Museum Women's Grant in 2021. She was awarded the AFAC and Magnum Foundation's Arab Documentary Photography Program Grant in 2020, the National Geographic Society's Emergency Grant for Journalists in 2020, and the Creative Activism Award in 2021. Most recently, Rehab received the Photo Evidence W Award in 2022 to publish her long-term project, The Longing of the Stranger Whose Path Has Been Broken, in a book form. So first of all, Rehab, congratulations on that recent award. And I will turn it over to you to share your screen and tell us a little bit about your practice.
Thank you, Irina. I really appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be joining this talk and to be in conversation with Orin and Tabitha. So today I'm going to be presenting to you guys a couple of my projects just to give you an idea of what I do. And I'm going to be starting with the long-term project that Orin just mentioned that I've recently won an award to turn into a book. So this project is called The Longing of the Stranger Whose Path Has Been Broken, a super long title. It's a translated Bedouin poetry. So the project started off as just me trying to understand my estranged Bedouin ancestry. I'm Egyptian, but I come from a fourth generation Bedou who have not been able to live in our native land, Sinai, which is in a specific region in Egypt. Bedouin communities are formerly nomads, but now have been residing in Sinai for more than 1,500 years. So I didn't know anything about my Bedouin ancestry growing up, but I was extremely connected to Sinai in so many different ways. I was connected to the community. Since I was a little girl, we would go to Sinai and be with the community for many months. And I had this understanding or appreciation of Sinai and the land because my father was stationed there during the occupation. So our family was very connected to the land and understood how precious it was and how much we need to respect the indigenous community that lives in this land. And little did I know that I was part of this indigenous community without even understanding. I grew up and I became more connected to the land and the people. I became a civil rights activist to the Bedouin community, and I understood more about the discrimination the indigenous communities at large go through. You know, from getting their civil rights, from being understood as as civilized people just like all of us. But unfortunately, many indigenous communities around the world are seen as a threat to modern society, as seen as closed off, which is honestly quite the contrary. So the project started off as just me trying to understand what it is to be Bedouin in contemporary times. But by time and by involving the community in this conversation, I felt that the project sort of deviated into something a little bit more broad. It's more about the feeling of belonging, or the process of me trying to seek where I belong, basically. And that sort of developed into more of a broader question of what it means to belong. And for the Bedouin community, what it means to belong is this interconnectedness between people and land, their connection to the land, and how their connection to the land has given them ways to survive, but also they've been paying a lot of, a lot in return, because their connection to the land has made them not being able to get their civil rights because they are considered as different from the urban society, basically. But again, the land that they keep protecting, it keeps giving them back, and they keep surviving through that land. And so I started to try to understand if this could actually be the same definition for all of us on the notion of belonging. And throughout the project, I felt that because we as human beings, we lose connection to the land in so many different ways. By time, we sort of start to get this loss of identity. And this is why we're sort of all trying to seek where we belong, because we have lost touch to the land some way. And in a way, I'm trying to learn from the Bedouin community how to reconnect to the land, how I could reconnect to my Bedouin ancestry, and try to define this notion of belonging that we could all relate to somehow. So it became so extremely broad. And for 5 years, I've been trying to involve the community in so many different conversations about that. But I felt that I needed to also show the community's collaboration or the involvement in a more visual way. So I started to let go that the project is just a photography project, and I started to think about it as a community project. And so the community started to actually add their own mediums into the work. So for the female Bedouin community members who have always been extremely worried about how they're being represented, and that's because of the previous representations of them in the media, of how they could be seen as voiceless or secondary to the community, which is actually quite the contrary. They were very worried about being photographed, let alone to actually be involved in the project visually. So in a number of conversations, we have decided that we could merge between my medium, photography, and a traditional medium that a lot of the Bedouin women use, which is embroidery. What I would do is that I would photograph the woman. Most of the community members who were involved were very close friends of mine. I would photograph her and print the image on fabric and then give it back to her. And with embroidery, she would start embroider on it. And she would have full control over what to show and what to hide. And that way, every female Bedouin member is able to control the representation and have the full freedom of, how they would be represented at the project. So this is Nadia, and she embroidered this image with her cousin Mariam. This is Hajja Rabia, and she decided to do some tattoo work on her hand. And the embroidery work also became a way for the women to comment on specific issues. Some of the issues are climate change and how the community has been struggling with water because of the drought that has been going on for many years. Some other women decided to embroider to comment on the social discrimination that they go through when they leave Sinai and go to urban cities for any social commitment. And so embroidery became this way for the female members to actually comment and be part of not just the conversation about the notion of belonging that is quite broad, but also the discrimination, social injustice that the Bedouin community in specific have been going through. For the male members of the community, they decided that they want to be involved visually by adding poetry, by handwriting their poetry, and also recording themselves reciting it. So I've started to collect different poetry of male members, and that poetry actually not just shows the different voices of the men and how poetry is sort of embedded within the Bedou blood. It also shows a lot of layers in regards to how the community is connected to the land. So the project became so many different layers of poetry, of sound, of embroidery, and it reflected something that is a bit more poetic than I initially intended, rather than a traditional documentary form of trying to understand where I am within the community and who are the Bedouin community. It became something a bit more broader and a lot more poetic about the metaphors that defines the notion of belonging, basically. And I started to play with the different mediums, trying to create diptychs between my photography and the poetry, creating these conversations between myself and the community. Even photographs, even the portraits, they are collaborative. A lot of the community members will contact me saying that they want to be part of the project. They choose where to be photographed, how to be photographed, and together we would select, the final image. Another collaboration that I made with the community members, specifically the older members of the community, I had consistently received an answer when I asked them what it means to belong, and they would simply say the land. The land, it's their main essence or their main way to define their identity. especially for the older members who have gone through the occupation, have gone through the war, they understand how precious every drop of sand it is in the land. And so they had a lot of concerns in regards to how they're passing over this land to the younger generations, who sort of started to disconnect with the land. And so together we decided to create this field guide, a small pocket-sized field guide that includes the plants that the community members, the older members of the community know about their medicinal use or hygienic use. And we would add the plants with the information about it and give it or distribute it to the younger members of the community. So in pages of the field guide, you would find plants that have been foraged by the older generations, their handwriting, writing down information about its use, and translation in English, which was actually requested by the younger members in order to make use of the field guide and sell the plants to foreigners and tourists, and more information on where to find it with illustrations. So for example, this plant over here is called rajra, and it's natural soap. What you do is that you put it under water and you rub your hands and it becomes very foamy and it cleans your hands. And if you put it on your face without rinsing with water, it becomes sunblock as well. This over here is called the lasik and it's alternative band-aid. And funny enough, you would only find it on top of the mountains where usually people get wounded. And it's very sticky and you simply put it on your wound. It doesn't leave for 3 days. And after that, you wouldn't even find a scar after your wound. So the field guide includes so many different plants that has a lot of benefits and a lot of beneficial and medicinal use. And with a grant from National Geographic and the award that I got from the Creative Activism, I was able to distribute this field guide for free to the younger members of the community, who for them, the field guide is not just a way to reconnect to the land, it's also a way for them to create a different kind of income generation. And that way they will be able to remain in the land that they feel that they belong to without having to look for other places for better opportunities.
Rehab, if I can just, sorry, just as I interrupt as you're speaking.
It's okay, go ahead.
How many of these field guides did you hand out? And like, how many did you make? How many did you hand out? And how are these plans in the books? Are they kind of in pressed form?
Well, they're not pressed form, they're photographed. Let me go back just so they're photographed with sort of like a reference scale. It's a Bedouin style reference scale where I got like a stick and I created centimeters lines. But they're photographs. I actually have a copy of the field guide that I could show you later if you want, but I need to grab it. And because of the grant, I was able to print and distribute 50 copies, but I'm planning to find more grants and be able to distribute it a bit more widely, and not just to the Bedouin community, but I'm also planning to print it and sell it to anyone who's interested, and the revenues will go back to the younger members of the Bedouin community.
And another question I had about a couple of slides earlier, about the poetry, which I just thought was so beautiful. Were they poems written by members of the community, or are they poems that are well known within the community, well known within the culture?
It's written by them. That's the thing. Like Bedouin men are extremely romantic. So in their way of expressing love, anger, whatever, they would write poetry. So it was quite easy to collect all of that original poetry by them.
And is the handwriting yours, or did they actually write for you and you printed those?
All the handwritings are by Bedouin members. So the handwriting of the poetry is by younger male members, and the handwriting in the field guide is by the older members.
I think it's I'll let you go on. I won't interrupt you anymore, but I just thought that was such a beautiful collaborative spirit in this entire project.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And for me, it was very important to involve the voices of the Bedouin community. For years, while I was I worked on this project since 2008. So it's quite a long-term project. And for years, I didn't feel right about having just my photographs. It felt wrong. Although it's a personal project, it still involves a community who has a voice. And I felt that there was something missing, and there was something that just didn't feel right. I was not able to move forward with the project for some reason until I was able to let go of the idea that the project is a photography project. It's about me. It's not about me. It's about the Bedouin community, and it's about us. All of us, as you know, as humans, we experience one way or another this issue with belonging, this loss of identity somehow. And I wanted to involve the community, the Bedouin community, who I'm sort of citing this, this research process with, So I'm gonna also show another project that I've worked on in 2020. It's called Traces of What Remains, and it's sort of it started off as a way for me to pay tribute to 10 years after the revolution. I'm a generation who was extremely involved with the Egyptian revolution, January 25th, 2011. I was graduating from college. It was a life-changing time for me. I almost got killed a number of times, but I also lived and understood what life means during the revolution. And it changed my life dramatically, because before that, even though I was studying photography, I was planning to be a wildlife photographer because I hated human beings. I had zero passion, compassion towards anyone. But with the revolution, I sort of developed this empathy towards humans and human stories, and it changed my life completely, both personally and professionally. After that, I just fell in love with the idea of telling stories about people, about actual people. And I published my first book, which is called The Road to Tahrir, with 5 other fantastic photographers documenting the revolution. So for Traces of What Remains, I wanted to look for the remaining traces of the revolution, which has unfortunately been diminishing, has been erased intentionally by the regime in order to sort of erase this idea of the revolution, and trying to look for better opportunities and a better future for the Egyptian society. So in this project, I collaborated with former activists who the very few who remain in Egypt freely. And I'm laughing out of sadness, honestly, because a lot of activists have either been killed or imprisoned or have had to flee the country. So the remaining ones, we had to stay sort of away from the limelight and try to get rid of any memorabilia, anything that has to do with the revolution, in order to try to avoid getting arrested. So for many former activists, they have not been able to process what they have been through. And so not being able to look through the different things that they have left has also created this sort of hole. And for many of the activists that I've worked with for this project, it was their first time to process what they have gone through during the revolution somehow, and try to look for these very small memorabilia that remained. And this project was a little bit more challenging for me, because I needed to cover the identities of all of the collaborators that I've been working with, not just to respect them culturally, but also it's a life or death situation. So I needed to look for ways to show the different identities and the different experiences each has gone through, without putting them in a situation where they would be at risk that the project would result them in them getting imprisoned or arrested or murdered and so on. So for example, here I'm using different names for everyone. Shireen here, she is photographed to the right, and I create diptychs with an item that she has left that she didn't get rid of for one reason or another. So the item that she has left is a notebook that has written on the cover, "Against military trials to civilians," which has been going on since the revolution. Hoda here has not the face mask is not from COVID, it's from the gas bobs during the revolution. And to the right, it's a book, one of the very few books that documents different chants people use during protests. And unfortunately, after the second edition, this book was sort of terminated. It cannot be published anymore in Egypt. A third project that I would like to show is called Women of the South. And this project I did in collaboration with an institute or a foundation in Egypt. And this foundation supports different local organizations supporting women. So the project here documents women who have survived human trafficking and who live in south of Egypt. A lot of women in south of Egypt, they are sold by their family, by their fathers in specific, ages as young as 14, by rich Arab men from Saudi Arabia, from the Gulf, and they will be sold as sort of like legal prostitution, as they get married for like temporarily for maybe 2 weeks, and after that they return to their families. And a lot of the women, they go through that so many different times throughout their life, and the money that they gain from this process is given to the fathers, who are able to build stories in their buildings in order to marry off the brothers, the men in the family, which is ironic enough. So for a lot of the women, they needed to sort of escape this, and a local organization supports them in order for them to escape with their children that they had during human trafficking into other villages around Egypt. And so I spent a number of months with a lot of these inspiring and extremely powerful women who sort of recreated their entire life and created businesses for themselves in order to support their children. And it was a process that was quite hard because I didn't want to re-victimize the women. I wanted to celebrate their power, their strength, because not a lot of us could go through such traumatic experiences and be able not just to create a life for ourselves, but also for our children. So these women are super women, and I wanted to honor them. So it took me quite a while. I didn't photograph them whatsoever. I just wanted to spend time with them and see how we can celebrate their life and their accomplishments instead of focus on their traumatic experiences being sold by their fathers. This photograph here is of a woman who recently been able to escape one of the men that she got married to forcefully. She left him in Saudi Arabia, but he kept her children. And so here she was meeting a lawyer who's trying to help her in order to retrieve her children that she got from him. And that's it.
Well, thank you, Rehab. That was our 3 incredible bodies of work that you showed us, and so compelling, and showing different aspects of these women's lives, Arab women that we don't normally get to see. And I just want to say that I just saw your Instagram post for International Women's Day of Egyptian women you met during a lot of these assignments. And the smiles on their faces were infectious. I found myself smiling as I was scrolling through the images. And I find a lot of images of Arab women, and men too, in the West is often so politicized and often very sensitive, whether they're, veiled or in a burqa, whatever it is. And I really appreciate seeing your images where they're apolitical in many ways. I mean, they are political in their own ways, but they are seen without these sort of Western preconceptions. How have your images been received within, let's say, the Bedouin community, but also, outside as you put their imagery out into the world?
Well, in regards to this specific project with the Bedouin community, I was very sensitive and I was very aware of how important I need to get an approval from not just the women who are being photographed, but also the community at large before putting the work outside. It was very important because because Bedouin women in specific have been seen in so many different, gazes throughout the years. And so for them, it was very important to be seen as women who have a voice, as women who are part of the community rather than, being part of a chair because they're not. They're actually the ones that run the community. And they were really aware of social media and how an image could go viral. So a lot of the women who gave approval of the images, they didn't want their images to be put on social media, and I needed to respect that. It was just hard for me at first to try to convince a curator or try to convince an editor that yes, the image could be go to print, but please don't put it on social media. They didn't understand that. But what's amazing is that the women understood that their images could be seen not just in a different context on social media, but also the image could be taken and used in different ways that would be against them somehow. They all approve of the work right now. They're all really excited of the book, which is amazing. And a lot of the community members, especially the older members, they see this book as hopefully as an alternative archive, one that they have been part of moving it rather than, being good subjects in that archive of them, which is crazy.
I already mentioned this, but I also really love our images of the men in the community. Because as somebody who studied, Orientalism through art history, the representation of Arab men has often taken on this tone of hostility, of being threatening, and there's something so beautiful and poetic in the way you've represented them that's very different from what we normally see. Thank you so much, Rehab. I'm going to ask Tabitha. I'm going to quickly introduce Tabitha and ask her to speak so we can be in a conversation. And so many people are leaving the most, the sweetest messages because they're so moved by your work. And I really want to bring Tabitha Soren into the conversation.
That was great, Rehab. I love that picture of the man on his back with the flower in his mouth.
I've been thinking that
too. Thank you. That flower Bedouin women use to reduce labor and period pain, by the way.
Oh, that's
even better.
Even better, I was about to say. That's great.
Thank you, Orin. Thank you, Tabitha.
Yeah, thank you. So talking about Tabitha, a visual artist in different domains for over 25 years, Tabitha Soren has long explored the intersection of psychology, culture, politics, and the body. She was born in San Antonio, Texas, and lived in 7 US states, Germany, and the Philippines during her formative and adolescent years. She received her degree in 1989 from NYU and was awarded a fellowship from Stanford in 1997. Tabitha too has so many awards and accolades to her name. So again, I'm going to condense everything down, and it's not going to do your work justice, but in addition to your work being nationally and internationally exhibited, her work is also in many private and public collections, including the Harvard Art Museum, the Getty Museum, the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago. Tabitha has published 3 books, Surface Tension, Fantasy Life, and Trace. And this summer, I believe Surface Tension will be shown at Pier 24 San Francisco and the Ulster Museum in Belfast in Northern Ireland. Again, that was a super, super condensed version of everything that Tabitha has done, but I really just want to hear from her instead of babbling on myself. So Tabitha, take it away and tell us a little bit more about your practice.
Thanks, that was plenty. I often go through the bodies of work in a presentation like this, but today I thought I would challenge myself to try to make sense of how it all connects, because I don't think it's so obvious. I do tend to make some big visual shift for each body of work, which is, I've been told by more successful artists, is career suicide, but that's just the way it comes out. So as you mentioned, I'll share my screen and then see. Oh, let's see. Here we go. Let's see. Just one more second. There we go. So I have always been interested in psychology and culture and politics. and it really also relates to the body. And in my first career as a television reporter, all these things were important, and now as an artist as well. Working in TV news taught me how to tell a story through visuals. I had to pay close attention to body language for what people weren't saying on camera, and how the shape of their body changes the meaning of the words that they speak. But I found that the nuance of what I wanted to examine in television reporting, especially the more successful I got, and the bigger news organizations for which I was working, that stuff got lost on the cutting room floor. I started like this picture, when I see it, yes, like I'm trying to, you see these hands, maybe you're thinking of Georgia O'Keeffe's hands, you see all of the holes in the picture, which were created by a pellet gun from the back. I love that the paper stands up and creates a shadow. So there's a lot going on, but my eye is always drawn to that scar on his hand, which I didn't know was there until he lifted it for the photo, for the portrait. And that's the kind of thing that I really love that I get to work with, because I remember this shoot with this splinter group of the Republican Party that didn't believe in fluoride. And when I was interviewing one of the guys, I looked down and he had flip-flops on, and his toenails had grown and covered the front of his toes. And I just really wanted that in the piece somewhere, because I felt like it said a lot about him, but there was no room. So anyway, I digress. But I do think TV news in that vein requires a very true or false, black or white, objective story. And after over a decade of that, I found that I was just yearning for a place of more subjective truth, where there was a lot more gray area, because the older I got, it seemed like life was a lot more gray. And that's how I ended up as an artist, with the help of a fellowship from Stanford.
Sorry, Tabitha, I didn't mention this in your intro, but for those who may not be aware, Tabitha was a reporter for, remind me of all of your networks, MTV News, ABC, and NBC. So that's why you're seeing all of these incredible images.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be presumptuous. I just, I'm old, so I had a first career.
Not at all.
Yeah. So in television, it's very easy to, if I want to simplify it, like what one has to do with the other, besides just telling visual stories. In television, you're shooting 30 frames a second. And now I'm just sort of focusing on one frame at a time. And my photographs are usually only the first step in making the work. For example, I want the compositions in the relief series that you're seeing here to evoke absences and memories and ghosts. And since it's International Women's Day, I can say feelings. So I shoot the relief photos first, and then after living with them a while, by hanging them on the walls of my studio and seeing which ones actually don't get boring, I turn the best ones into reliefs with knives, scissors, pellet guns, or as you see here, with acrylic paint. The resulting mediated images examine the vulnerabilities that we all carry. I'm trying to uncover something like in an archaeological investigation. I'm trying to create sort of fullness and emptiness with the sky and the ground, the matter and the void. I think a palpable sense of pathos connects all my images in each body of work. And the other thing I do pretty consistently is create each new series using the investigative tools I use during journalism, frankly. I head to books and research studies and Google Scholar and statistics, and that lays a necessary analytical foundation for the visual ideas I communicate. Sometimes I have a great idea and then I immediately think, oh, that's a terrible idea. I'm the only person who would relate to that or think that was good. And then, if you read or get other information that is interacting or intersecting with the idea that you've engaged with, it gives you sort of confidence to carry on and pursue it. And like Rehab, my projects last, 5 years, 7 years. So it better be a deep, meaningful project that you can unpack for all that time. So I think those data points then merge with my experience growing up in a military family, spending my youth moving around and adjusting to the cultural differences, the social structures and visual cues that came with each relocation. And the constant navigation of environments hinged on threat and survival, because often military bases were involved. I think it led to a true understanding of what it means to always live on high alert. And it gave me a level of empathy for internal struggle and a sincere desire to show the myriad ways we reveal ourselves as we move through the world. When I'm deciding where or how to rip, mold, or slice, I'm concentrating on creating a shape that implies something unspoken, unacknowledged, unexplained, and overlooked. There's definitely an interplay between order, precision, and disintegration. I find it really kind of odd that there's a lot of like violent movement and choreography on the part of me while I'm creating these things, yet a lot of them have a very sort of quiet, serene, they end up looking kind of quiet and serene. There's a tension there between the beauty of the landscape and portrait and the damage that I inflict on it. It's sort of my way of creating a photograph about loss and absence, but also maybe loss of control. Maybe it's a threat or a dashed hope or an unfair assumption or an impending change of fortune. All of these emotions deserve respect and consideration, but in our fast-paced, technologically dominated lives, I think looking at art and making art is one of the few places where we can, slow down and digest some of these uncomfortable emotions. For me, photography is about trying to take fuller possession of the reality of your life. It's a release of elation and pain. And honestly, at the very base level, I just see my pictures as metaphors for the difficult twists and turns of everyday living. I too, like Rehab, use a layered approach, and I'm playing with the bounds of viewers' perception. But by doing this, I'm also making visible the many varied and sometimes simultaneous psychological states many of us are prone to, but often hide. This creates a tension between what is seen and what lies underneath. So for example, these images are from my Motherlode series, and they allow very different readings from each image. And each image really is a time lapse in one frame. I mounted a camera over my bed, and so the bodies and the people and the cluttered baby accoutrements move, but the furniture doesn't. And so that's why I'm able to layer them on top. Sometimes I change to a tighter lens, so there's a little bit of fluctuation there. And thankfully, I was always so tired. I never wanted to stand up on top of the bed and reach to the ceiling and change the lens. It just seemed like the bridge too far, even though it does not take that much effort. But I'm very happy I did, because it gave me a lot more leeway when creating these pieces. So newborn life was hard for me, and I couldn't believe that I chose to do it a third time. A new baby is obviously a blessing, but it's also lonely and stifling to take care of one. I think the Motherlode series is an example of my work being about humanizing, normalizing, and bringing the morbidity, dread, and anxiety that is part of mothering and really of everyday life to the surface. And with any luck, I'm allowing people to feel that connection with anyone else who may have struggled to feel bliss at this time. I think people who make art or surround themselves with art are many times, this goes for collectors too, trying to escape ordinary understanding. We're conjuring up ideas that transcend our quotidian experience. In my community, at least, the pressure to love being a mom 100% was overwhelming. And I think this project was a way for me to grapple with that. This project began as a hedge against life as a mother, overtaking life as an artist. Caring for another baby and ultimately for 3 children could make an artistic life shrivel. And yes, there have always been women artists, including very driven ones, who have never harbored doubts about the feasibility of straddling the line between motherhood and a creative accomplishment. But my series Motherhood is not for them. Instead, I felt very taxed and very needed, but also very invisible. The images get at that ethereal quality of not feeling like a whole person. I'm not really in focus in the photographs because my brain isn't in focus either. Being an artist and a mom is like running with weights on. What do they say about women? That you have to do the same job, but in high heels and backwards. But I think when you're a mom, you're doing it in high heels backwards and with weights on your ankles. And I can't tell you how many times when I see great work that I love, I go and I check, oh, it's a female, great. Like it's another woman artist, but then I'm like a little envious and I'm thinking, are they a mom? You know, her work is so great, but does she have children? Are we in the same race? But I would say that, I don't know, like lately, thankfully, when I look at these motherhood pictures, I feel like a survivor. So the next few images are from a new body of work. It's been behind me in the studio. I'll just give you a short preview, but I'm happy to answer questions. It's called Some Blows Are Heavy, and it's very much in progress. And let's see. These pieces are very much about, again, the tension between the invisible and visible. See, some of my work is consistent. It's just like a different way of presenting it visually. And I found that the language of mixed media really helps me create the image that I have visualized in my head. If you see here in the lower right, like there's a real texture to these pieces. There are layers of resin on top of photographs that build up. So they really are tableaus, and they're meant to be a model of experience. I want them to connect to different experiences in life that other people have had, not just this one instant when I shot this one particular photograph of a woman in Jerusalem. The layers I create also stand in for the layers of things in life that also block our vision. I start with one of the photographs and therefore acknowledge what we already know and can only see through a camera. But then I'm trying to complicate the surface because life is way more complex than one moment captured by pressing a shutter. So this is a train wreck and an airplane crash. They are easier to read in person. But they were done at the beginning of COVID when everyone was walking around saying this year has just been a train wreck. And that sort of got me thinking about how arbitrary the effects of a worldwide lockdown was on various people. And even when there's not a plague, I think that everything some days really feels difficult to see. Or maybe you just don't want to see what's there. And in Some Blows Are Heavy, I'm creating that mediated vision. It's a way to represent my reality around me, the way it feels to me, even though it's not the way it's seen by everyone. And I don't know, I think in the way that one's psyche or mental state at a moment in time transforms the way you see the world, the resin transforms the photograph and shapes the conditions by which the viewer experiences them. So it's a view into the internal and how the internal affects one's perspective on the outside world. The ink and resin with which I'm covering the photographs creates blind spots, just like the embroidery in Rehab's work. It's also a way for me as an artist to demonstrate agency. I'm allowing the viewer to see certain things and obscure others. My hand and not merely the camera is making the piece. You're looking at this image through my eyes, and I'm directing your attention towards certain areas that I find more intriguing in the photograph compared to other areas in the picture. And it also alerts the audience that you're looking at a deeply subjective gaze. And so getting more in touch with subjectivity is, again, one of the reasons that I left television news. The physical choreography of the surface combines the documentary and the handmade, and the intimacy of scale and raised texture lend to close looking. As we traverse the picture, I'm hoping that energy builds and swells, and that I'm merging opposing moments of the sublime and peril. The images are not very easy to look at. I mean, a car crash is what we rubberneck by, but the scale of these is pretty large so that you can spend time in it and see that there is a emergency responder sort of ghosting through the long exposure. And there is this beauty of the purple sky because it's a long exposure. So the light changed into a less realistic sky. There's excitement and fright because of the police lights on the front of the 18-wheeler. So I want all of those things happening and, at the same time. And the photograph just really acts as a substrate for the ink and the resin that I apply by hand slowly and over time, because it takes a long time to dry and it doesn't like to build, it likes to flatten. So you have to, it's not unlike, oil painting, I suppose. The physical choreography is definitely something I'm very interested in. I was very happy to get off my computer and make things in my studio. It really, I was happy that I was able to find something to combine the documentary and the handmade and the tableau. And it's my intention for the intimacy of scale and raised texture to have people look closely. And I am mimicking some of the things that a camera can do, like these lens flares and the reflection of color and the building of color over a long exposure. But then it goes into an intuitive space in the creation process where I'm deciding what goes where. And on another basic level, I'm excited that this work materializes photography for me in a way that a straight photo doesn't. And I think with all the digital photography out there and so many pictures that nobody even ever takes off their phone or puts them on a computer and never bothers to print them, I like how much of an object these things are. So thank you for listening and tuning in and spending time with us.
Well, thank you, Tabitha. And I think that was a perfect place to end it. Yes, thank you so much for the really beautiful presentation. Because I did have a question about that, because I think so much of your work is about how we communally, individually and communally perceive images around us. And I don't see your work as like anti-social media, anti-technology, but yet you're using a film camera. You have a lot of your works have these sort of smudgy fingerprints on it. You're using paint and gesso or perforations, things like that. And it feels like this need to bring human intimacy and expression, kind of like slow things down. Is there a commentary there about the sort of all expansive digital realm that we all live in now? Is there a kind of resistance to this fast-paced nature of technology, or is it something else entirely?
Well, I think that the things you're picking up on are all correct. I try not to move through the world thinking what I'm doing is in opposition to what other artists are doing. But I am also trying to find my community in the art world. And I think there's so many different art worlds. And what I have found is that the art historians, the painters, there are a lot of people who don't make photographs that are my favorite people to be with. And so I guess I'm just over time expanding my materials. And I do think, I'm sure you've seen that Eric Kessel's piece where he prints out all the images that were shot on one day and it fills up an entire room. And you've got Penelope Umbrico who, made a piece of every sunset on Twitter, or I don't know if I have that exactly right, but, there is this just vomitous aspect of all the different images people are taking with cameras that I'm, I guess, subconsciously working against. And also, honestly, as a mom running around the world with a camera around my neck has not been all that possible. I looked at someone like Rehab, who in the first meeting was coming to us in the back of a car, nursing a child, having the meeting, talking about places that she had to go to for her exhibit. And my head just explodes. Like, I'm doing both of these things, but I don't know how to do it like that. I think maybe her energy level might be higher than mine, but there is a level of working in the studio that you start to examine materials. And for me, it's also, I'm teaching myself. I'm teaching by asking my artist friends, how would I do this? And they say, you can't do that, which is always what photography experts told me. And then I started scratching on the pictures and it turned out pretty cool. And so I'm really just, what motivates me, honestly, is trying to make something that I have not seen before. And not just in the canon, not because tons of women are cut out of there. You can't even consider that. I want to make something that hasn't already been made.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. I just want to let everyone know it is 2:00. We'll go until like 2:15 because I do want to get some of these questions in and get into a conversation. So appreciate everybody sticking around. I have a question from Libby who says that the works behind you, and you showed some of them in your presentation, they look like paintings. Are they printed or mounted on panel or board, and what are the sizes?
So any photographer out there who's spending money glazing and framing their prints is going to be so bloody excited. So I am mounting them myself on just these, cradled wooden boards. And the resin allows me to paint the sides, so I don't need to frame them. And the resin, which, write this down, is called New Clear. It's UV protected. It does not yellow. It is not going to turn into one of those things you see from 1970s garage sale, the shell inside the yellowed paperweight. It is a conservator's dream, but it also saves me, I don't know, $5,000 every time I need to frame something. And they're all unique pieces. So I've made them all slightly different sizes. There are some typical ones, like the one I just held up is 30 by 40. After I just took down a show with a lot of pieces that were 5 by 7 feet. And that looks really great in a 6,000 square foot exhibition space, but they do not look so good stored in my storage unit. They're taking up the entire thing. So beginner
what is the name of the resin again? Somebody just asked.
Resin is new. It's a play on nuclear, but it's NU-CLEAR. And it's basically only been around for 6 to 8 months. But it's really important you know that, because conservators will, if you're dealing with museums, will be very interested in the archival aspects of it, as they should. So I print out an inkjet photograph, not for once, like the cheap paper actually helps because it's covered in plastic. And then you're putting, archival glue underneath and gesso. It's a whole long process, but happy to share if you want to email me. I won't burden everybody with the details, but they do look like paintings, but there is definitely a photograph underneath that I shot.
Great, thank you. I want to go back to your motherhood series. I want to bring Rehab into this conversation. You know, this is International Women's Day, and the National Museum of Women in the Arts has, you know, our mission is about obviously advocating for gender equity in the art world. And I think there have been, you know, we have made some strides overall, but obviously still a lot of work needs to be done. And you've mentioned some of it in the art market and in exhibitions and gallery representation. In your, both of your opinions, what are some of the challenges facing the women artists face today? And, you know, what are, you know, one or two like top things that you feel need to be addressed right away? I know there are a lot, but something that you have personally noticed and you feel like we need to work on this right now.
Rehab,
So
why don't you go first?
Rehab, yeah, why don't you go?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges. It's really hard to pick only two. But off the top of my mind, I'm a new mother, right? So it's been really, really, really hard for me um to actually tell in public that I'm a recent mother, because there is this sort of automatic assumption that once, you know, an artist becomes a mother, her work is sort of plummets down, the career plummets down, whether it is opportunities to exhibit personal work or opportunities to get assignments. There's just an assumption that, okay, you're a mother, you're not going to be able to do this for me. I'm going to look for a single woman, or worse than that, I'm going to look for a man to do the job, which is something that, you know, that happens all the time, unfortunately. So it's been quite a fear of mine throughout the time that I decided to start a family, throughout my pregnancy, and after I gave birth, Ida sort of gave me this strength to say in public that I'm a mother, and whoever is not okay with that would have to live with the consequences of hiring a man not being able to tell stories like I do. So so that's one, of course. Another has to do with being a mother and also being from a non-white region and country, and it's always being seen as less competent than that white man that's coming to parachute onto my own, you know, community to tell the story. That's something that I've gone through so many different times, and it's really funny when I face something the other way around. I've been working on a project in the Netherlands. I worked on it from 2016 until 2021 with anyone else coming into my country. And I still get the question every time I go into any meeting to present the work in the Netherlands, asking me, why are you doing it? Why isn't there, you know, a Dutch guy doing the job instead? So there's two different layers, gender and also ethnicity, that plays issues with that.
Yeah, and I think it goes to show that we really need people from different communities. We need women in leadership positions as gatekeepers. So these opportunities are not always, you know, saved for cisgender white males. So, you know, everybody can, and there can be a diversity of opportunities for everyone. Tabitha, what about you? You've already mentioned
I absolutely agree with her. I don't want to repeat what she said, so I'm going to take on a different aspect of the art world. I would say that it's really disturbing to me when I know a handful, maybe more than a handful now, of female art collectors who have actually acquired their own money, or you know, maybe they're also using their husband's money. But I think the most important thing that could change the status of women in the art world is an economic one, that women need more buying power. And when they have the buying power, they need to buy artists by women. I know way too many people who have the money, who are female collectors, and they like, you know, people's Instagram and they go to people's openings. But when it comes time to buy an expensive piece, instead of spending the money on a female artist, they end up buying like a Kehinde Wiley or Mark Bradford, or it's not females. So we have made progress up to a point, but then if you don't have people collecting your work, those people are on boards, those people influence what the museums exhibit. I mean, it's a whole kind of ugly
cyclical. It's very cyclical.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
So if it helps, it eases the curators being able to borrow it from somebody on the board. You actually have to spend the money on female artists' work. And I think that is the key. I'll leave it there. Don't get started.
I think that's a feeling that we at NMWA, especially given our mission, feel to our core, because certainly the art market numbers don't reflect, and we talk about gender equity, but most of the money is still going towards work by male artists, right? And so you're right, like where are the collectors, where are the people spending the money on women artists, and actually, supporting them on that economic level. I think that's such an important point to make. I have so many questions, but we're already past 2, so I'm going to see if anybody has any other questions. So I have a concluding question. I gave you both a little bit of homework, as you know. And for everybody still who's tuned in, you may know about our 5 Women Artists campaign that we began during Women's History Month. So I'm glad we ended where we have, because I think it dovetails really nicely into this last sort of question. Our 5 Women Artists campaign, we began this during Women's History Month in 2016, where we took to social media and we asked this question: can you name 5 women artists? And our goal as an institution was to show the relative invisibility of women artists, and also to challenge their systemic omission in the art world. And so since then, it had become this huge movement. We have thousands of individuals and cultural organizations, institutions participating. So I asked Rehab and Tabitha to each give us the names of 5 other women artists who have had an impact on their lives. So Tabitha, can you give us the name of 5 artists who have impacted you, and maybe talk about them as a group or highlight a couple of them?
Okay, I'm gonna list them, but then I'm just gonna quickly go back and explain for a couple what I like about them. So there's Jennifer Packer, who's up at the Whitney right now. I just saw her show at MoCA in LA. She's a painter from Philadelphia. Gwen John, very long dead, British painter. And Genevieve Figgis from Ireland. She was born in 1972. She's also a mom. Her paintings are super funny and haunting. It's like if Goya painted Rococo. Diana Al-Hadid, her sculptures, I have no bloody idea how she makes them. I know what she uses, but this is, the brilliance of being an artist, right? I can tell you what my material are, and you're not going to necessarily be able to make it. But her sculptures kind of drip. And then there's Firle Baez, I think is how you pronounce her last name. And she really can do anything. Oh my God. She can draw, she can paint. She's a great storyteller. And what I like about her almost, maybe not the most, but a lot, is that she's always smiling. She's not one of these po-faced, my life is horrible, I'm mentally, messed up artist that has that pose. And she didn't grow up wanting to be an artist, but boy, are we lucky that she ended up there. The Gwen John person is probably the most sort of important reference for me. She painted self-portraits at a time where there weren't even women artists. And I felt like, even though there weren't, her brother, everyone underestimated her. Rodin was her, boyfriend, use that term lightly, her brother, everyone around her got more attention than she did. But by making these self-portraits at a time where there weren't really any women artists that were taken seriously, I feel like she taught me that self-scrutiny is really critical to making art, and that there's this one self-portrait that's in the National Gallery in England, National Portrait Gallery, I believe, and everything about it is very detailed and almost tight. and then she has one hair out of alignment. And I felt like she was that tension with that one little piece of hair. It really showed me how much imperfection is a part of my work, and that everything that moves me is about where things go wrong or fall short, and that has a place in art. So she really spoke to me. She also painted herself with red hair. I don't know if she actually had it, but can't say that didn't have
definitely her portraits are all about self-reflection and psychological states of mind, and I think there's such a synergy with your work with that. Rehab, what about you? 5 women artists who have had an impact on you and your work?
Well, I have to start with Tanya Habjuka, who is an amazing photographer and artist, an amazing mentor. She's been mentoring me for so many years, and also an amazing friend. Our mentorship turned into an amazing friendship, and she's also editing my book, which is amazing. She's an amazing artist. She started off doing a lot of traditional photojournalistic work, but then she just developed her practice into so many different ways, working collaboratively with women from Syria. She's currently based in Palestine. Her work is just gives a different perspective on women and on our region. She is Jordanian Texan, proudly a Jordanian Texan, and she is bringing so much into our practice, and also so much to my practice, because she had a lot of influence on my process, trying to work collaboratively with protagonists, specifically in my long-term project. So that's one. There's Rena Effendi from Azerbaijan. She's an amazing photojournalist, creating work that defines what it means to be an ethical photojournalist in our time. Her work is extremely inspiring for me, and her stories from the revolution as well. She was documenting the revolution here in Egypt, is extremely different than any other foreign photographer that came in to document the revolution. She went into the locals. Susan Mizales, of course, there's no words that could describe her work and her ways of thinking ethically towards responsibility towards her subjects is amazing. And there's also Tyron Simon, whom I love, and how she uses photography, but uses so many different mediums in order to discuss topics that are important in our world, whether it is people who were wrongfully incarcerated, or how images are surrounding us and suffocating us one way or another, and how our memories could be changed by an influence of a police officer. So her work is just amazing, and it tackles so many topics about social issues. And finally, Nariman al-Mufti, who is an Egyptian Canadian photographer, and she, for me, she is one of the great photographers at the moment, whom I think is going to be creating a different definition of what it means to be a photojournalist in our time right now.
Thank you, Rehab. We dropped links to each of those artists in the chat box. I just thought this would be a really wonderful way to create a network, if you will, a constellation of women artists who support and advocate for one another, especially on International Women's Day, and hopefully introduce us and inspires us to look up some other incredible artists whom we may not have heard of before. So with that, I want to thank both of you, Rehab and Tabitha, for speaking with us today. I had such a wonderful time listening to both of you. Your works are so compelling, so profound, so moving. And to all of you for tuning in. There are a lot of unspeakable, tragic events happening in the world right now. I think all of our minds and hearts are with men, women, and children in Ukraine. And we just hope that this day of celebrating these beautiful voices offer you some respite, some joy from everything else that's happening. So happy International Women's Day to everyone, and we hope you stay healthy and safe. So thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.